we are actually debuting a new segment on today's show called Reed Ranks. So our very own Carl Reed, who's right here, will be tasked with putting together a top 5, and then we're going to bring on a special guest to fight him on it. So Carl, today you are ranking top 5 most underrated head coaches. Let's show you that list. Coming in at number 5 is the head coach of UNLV, Barry Odom.
Emily, Barry Odom has UNLV. People have not been this excited in Vegas since Jerry Tarkanian was the basketball coach of the Running Rebels. Taking UNLV to the Mountain West Championship game, 9 wins. That's something that hasn't happened in UNLV in a really long time. I think 1984. He has 2 very good young coordinators, defensive coordinator Mike Shear, who's been everywhere with him, and Brennan Marion.
All right, number 4 on your list is Marshall head coach Charles Huff.
Charles Huff, former running back coach at the University of Alabama. We haven't thought about Marshall in a real long time either. Huge win his first year, 26-21, on the road over Notre Dame. One of the top upcoming coaches in the business.
And at number 3, new Houston head coach Willie Fritz.
This is a name that only real ball coaches really seem to understand. He's won everywhere he went. Blinn Junior College, D2 Central Missouri State, FCS Sam Houston State, Georgia Southern Tulane, now getting a shot at the big leagues. Willie Fritz is a ball coach, and he's nothing but a winner.
All right, at number 2, Kansas head coach Lance Leipold.
Lance Leipold has coached places where it's really tough to win. Multiple-time Division III national championship, big winner in the MAC at the University of Buffalo, and he has people in Kansas talking more about football than they've talked about basketball recently. And the kind of recruits that they're bringing to Lawrence, Kansas right now, you have to respect Lance Leipold as an elite ball coach.
And your number 1 most underrated coach is Air Force's Troy Calhoun.
This is a guy whose name should be circulating more when big-time jobs come up. Troy Calhoun, a master of consistency, an option coach. Everybody doesn't like running the option, but he does have a lot of pro-style elements. Just does nothing but win. Troy Calhoun is a great ball coach.
All right, so there is Carl's top 5 most underrated coaches in college football. A lot of different leagues on this list, a lot of different names. I am very excited to see what our next guest does with this list, because I don't know about you guys, I am convinced. Carl convinced me. So let's welcome on national college football writer Brandon Marcello to debate. I always love when these two get together. Let's play some devil's advocate. Brandon, I'm just going to give you the floor. What's your biggest issue with this list?
All right, so how's Lance Leipold underrated when the University of Kansas is spending $448 million to build him a new football stadium and a new football district they're calling the Gateway District? $500 million. They're going to have to play games in the Kansas City Chiefs Stadium next year because they're wanting to get this thing done so quickly. Not underrated at all. His name has been connected to quote-unquote bigger jobs. Michigan State, most recently, of course. And he's only been there for 3 seasons at Kansas, and yet they're investing so much into him. And also, he's had to go out publicly multiple times to say, I'm not interested in leaving here. I want to stay at Kansas. This is a guy that has not been underrated. He's been praised by everybody, and a lot of jobs have come open, and they've looked at him to try to hire him. I don't think he's underrated at all. I think anybody you would talk to in the industry would say he's one of the best coaches out there.
Brandon, if you put up a list of the top coaches in college football from a fan perspective, they most likely wouldn't be able to pick Lance Leipold out of a lineup. And Kansas is investing in football the way they are because they finally got a guy who got it right and who's getting it right consistently. They're taking full advantage as a university of what he's built, but make no mistake about it, Lance Leipold has been an underrated football coach throughout his entire career.
No, I absolutely agree with that. But just to say that people haven't really heard about what's going on in Kansas, I think is ludicrous because they've been talking about Kansas every single Saturday for the last 2 years because of the big runs they've had. Heck, College Game Day was on campus there just a year ago in one of the bigger atmospheres they've had in quite some time. They were front and center for a 2-hour infomercial. People are very much well aware of what's going on at Kansas, and no one wants to play them right now. And their reason why that going into this new Big 12, they're one of the bigger teams to potentially look upon there. But listen, we can talk all day about Lance. He's a great coach, obviously, but to say he's underrated, he's not. People know who he is. I've got bigger issues on your list, though, further down, actually.
Please explain. What else?
Okay. All right. Let's start with. Listen, I love all the guys on your list here. Having said that, Charles Huff at Marshall, really, when I look at coaches that are kind of underrated, I look at what was done before them at the spot they were at and how they're doing to follow up on that. And Charles Huff, you said that no one was thinking about Marshall and what was going on before him. That's ludicrous, dude. He's 22-17 in 3 seasons. In the 3 years prior to him arriving there, they were 24-12 under Doc Holliday. Doc Holliday had 3 seasons there where he won 24 games at the end, and they didn't renew his contract. He also won a Conference USA division title. Charles Huff hasn't done that, and they actually took half a step back this season, and there's some question about going into this year just about the talent on their roster. So I've got a big issue with Charles Huff. I like the guy. I like him as a coach, but he has not done and improved upon what was left for him there under Doc Holliday.
Brandon, one thing I've always liked about you is you're an elite goalpost mover, and that you're bringing Doc Holliday up, who has absolutely nothing to do with this conversation. This is a list based on who's underrated right here in the moment. Doc Holliday is not coaching college football anymore, and he did do an excellent job at Marshall, but Charles Huff is also doing a very good job, consistent bowl wins at a place that's really, really tough to win at a place like Marshall. It's tough to recruit there, it's especially in this era where Group of 5 programs are getting pillaged by bigger schools. You lost a little bit this one.
Charles Huff is 22-17 in 3 seasons. He's 5 games above 500 at a school that has notoriously won in the past. There have been superstars that have come through there and other coaches who have won bigger than Charles Huff. And again, Charles Huff is only 3 years into his tenure there and hasn't really had a big, humongous season. I do think that he's hot on the tip of some people's tongues because, yes, they did beat Notre Dame back in 2022, but they did not capitalize on that at all, Carl. They did not go on a big run. They stubbed their toes near the end. And in fact, we're talking about people stubbing their toes. Barry Odom, listen, just his first year, so we got to see some things pan out. I think he's got an incredible assistant staff there. 9-5, great turnaround, but they lost 3 straight games to end the season. Some issues there down the road. I want to see if he can keep that up after a year, 2, or 3. Again, he's only been a head coach there for 1 season. We've seen people have flash in the pan type seasons, and then they kind of go down after the next couple of years. Barry Odom, I want to see him kind of maintain that success rate. Because as you said, it's very difficult to keep your talent there on the Group of 5 level. It's also very difficult to keep your hot assistant coaches with you, even though they've been with you for quite some time. And as you know, Carl, one of the big names there to keep an eye on in the future is Brennan Marion, his offensive coordinator. That's a guy that's going to be on the rise fairly quickly.
Brandon, listen to this. Once again, you try to trick our audience. You talking about the old days at Marshall when they were an FCS program led by Randy Moss and Chad Pennington. A lot of those games were won at a much lower level of college football. Once again, we're talking about who's underrated as it relates to this year. We haven't heard about UNLV football probably since Randall Cunningham was playing quarterback out there in Vegas. Barry Odom did an excellent job this year, does have a great staff, and as of today, Brennan Marion is still the coordinator there. They're posed for another good football season this year.
All right. So
Byron Leftwich, Cole Pennington. I just named 2 great quarterbacks there in the FBS at Marshall that have won big. So, all right, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we've talked about some of the guys later or lower down on this list, but we have to talk about who's number 1 on there, and Troy Calhoun. So, Brandon, is it safe to say that I can take your silence as you agree, or do you have something to say?
I think he's a guy that should have been given a bigger job sooner rather than later. But I do think that his name has come up here recently for some jobs. In fact, Arizona, Tulane was the one that had the most interest. In fact, he actually interviewed there, I'm told, back in December when that job came up, when Willie Fritz left for Houston. He also had some interest from Nebraska a few years ago. But the thing is, it's like if you stay somewhere too long, you almost get this stupid stigma attached to you by agents and athletic directors and all these search firms. He's coaching at his alma mater. He's been there nearly 20 years. All he does is win. We talk about him running the triple option, but his offense is so much more than that. And Carl knows that too. There are a lot of NFL concepts there. They like to do a little double I, a lot of interesting stuff in that offense, and they always tweak it to the personnel. And they just win every single year. He hasn't had that Mountain West Conference title yet, but they've been in the title game, and they're consistently winning 8-9 games a year at a service academy. Impressive stuff. He's the type of coach that, because of the way he handles a program, he would be successful anywhere. And if he does really want to move on and get a bigger job, someone needs to give him that opportunity. I thought that it was very, very possible it might happen at Tulane when he interviewed there in December. But I agree with that. I think he is potentially the most underrated coach, I should say, and overlooked coach in the country.
Well, Brandon, you finally made a good decision on today's show, and I'm glad about that. You bounced back at the end. You are right. Troy Calhoun's offense is so much more than the triple option. He has a ton of pro and NFL concepts in there. With the way the game is now with transfer portal and NIL, he may have the best job in the country for himself. For what he is and who he is and what he's been able to do, he may be better off staying right there, because when you jump into this Power 4 level now, formerly Power 5, it's sharks that are really deep in that water.
I'd also like to add, too, it feels like he's playing a whole different game when it comes to college football with NIL and transfer portal and the type of person that they're only allowed to bring into Air Force, not just the triple option. It's the way that college football has changed. So very impressive, 8-0 start to this last season. So this wasn't unintentional, guys, but I'm glad we came back together and a little bit more peaceful to end this segment. But thank you both so much.